Hey there, athletes. Coach John Ferry here from Team Wilpers. Very excited to welcome you here to our Week 6 athlete briefing for our Summer Send-Off Challenge. I feel like we just got started, but here we are approaching our final week. So we're going to start with a quick Week 5 review. So we started Week 5 here with those Canova style intervals. Hopefully you like these. One of my favorites coming to when I'm starting to feel really fit. Those were those half marathon and marathon pace intervals, but tied together without the recovery period. So we're really working on some endurance race paces, getting a lot of change back and forth there between half marathon and marathon, spending a real nice chunk of time training zone 3 as well. That second key workout of this week was the hill run workout. So we are really adding some zip to those hill intervals, getting some speed on incline. So the workout's really designed to build leg strength and get a lot of running efficiency that kind of comes with those hill repeats. And as always, we finish our week here with the endurance run, the bread and butter of our training. So I want to keep this nice and easy. Most people still probably have this coming up here over the weekend. So I know I've been kind of pushing for a year now, year plus, and getting in, continuing to check the boxes. And I know I also said that this time around we would have some of our admin team going in, really checking to see who on a week-by-week basis was maintaining 100%. So I actually have been given the name of a few winners here. I'm going to announce them here live, and then I'll be reaching out individually. So Week 3, go way back in time, but it still happened. Our Week 3 winners here were Adrian Montgomery and Kenitha Lemon. So we'll be reaching out. For Week 4, we had Jenny Mena and Ann Burley. So these were people maintaining 100% over the course of those weeks. Congratulations, nice job getting in, continuing to check the box off. We're going to be reaching out to you individually and get a little Team Wilpers gear in the mail to you. So congratulations. Obviously, we won't have a briefing next week, but we will have Week 5 and Week 6 winners. So keep getting in there, checking it off, and I'll make sure to announce it on the Facebook page. Week 6 workouts. So we're going to do this a little bit different than a lot of previous Week 6 and the challenges. Kind of wanted to maintain a slightly higher level of training, even though we've got a test for a lot of people coming up at the end of the week here. So we're going to start the week with our marathon pace intervals. So these intervals exclusively of marathon pace. But over the scope of this workout, we're reducing the volume and the intensity a little bit here. So while it's not an easy run per se, it's 100% a step down from where we were. So thought this would be an interesting opportunity to bring up a metric that we use kind of in designing workouts and designing schedules, which is TSS. So I know a lot of people have heard it on cycling side, but it's still very prevalent on the running side. And TSS means training stress score. The reason I bring this up is the Canova style workout of this week is a TSS or a training stress score of 61. While the Week 6 intervals here are going to be a TSS around 40. So I wanted to kind of discuss this very briefly here to illustrate how you can still have a bit of speed and pace involved in a week that's kind of technically a taperish kind of week, but still very much step down the intensity of the training you were doing to get ready to run hard on the weekend. So that's what we're trying to do here is reduce the intensity, reduce the volume without giving up totally on the pace. Hopefully it'll help you feel a little bit more connected coming into the weekend and even a little bit more kind of prepared to really hit that 20-minute test hard. Second key run of next week, micro interval run. So this is actually a workout that I've kind of adapted from cycling workouts more than other running workouts in the world. I've never actually seen kind of a written micro workout for running, so we're trying something a little bit new. The goal here is actually to allow you just short windows of opportunity to kind of push to VO2 max. And so why do I want that? Well, it's very, very likely that when you go into your 20-minute test, you're going to be running at a pace pretty darn similar to VO2 max pace. So while I don't want you to do a big, long, hard VO2 max workout right now, I just want you to be able to get a feel for that test pace before we get into the weekend and you start it off. So despite the fact that the pace here is VO2 max, this is not a VO2 max workout. And the reason is because that the intervals are too short and the recoveries are too long. So while you'll be pushing to VO2 max, not really going to have a chance for HR to drive up and kind of sustain that level. Not the point. And once again, I thought this would be a good opportunity on a second opportunity here. Use TSS as an analysis. Our hill workout TSS was around 59. This little micro interval workout is around 38. So for both of these workouts from week 5 to week 6, we're doing about a 30 to 35% adjustment on training stress. So, a 1/3 drop off while still maintaining a little bit of intensity here in the week. Third key workout of the week, the distance test. So we've discussed in the past strategy for this test many times. So I'm very intentionally today not going to do that. And it's not because it's not important, but in this particular challenge, we really wanted to not only prioritize the improvement and consistency over a 6-week period, but also a lot of fun. So the test is really just an opportunity for you to kind of prove to yourself what you've done over the course of 6 weeks, to compare it to your week 1 score, to compare it to test times from within the last 1.5 to 2 years, however long you've been testing. This is an opportunity for you to do something for yourself. So if that excites you in the same way that it excites me, get out and let it rip. Remember, the goal is just to be a little bit faster than last time. And if you're terrified by this test and you hate it and it is no fun and you're miserable, then just go run 60 minutes easy, have a nice long run. This is your workout, your time, so might as well enjoy it. For everyone that's reaching the end of the week, you can celebrate starting something that you committed to 6 weeks ago. That's victory enough for us, so congratulations in advance. We're going to jump right into some questions from the group. So question was, as the fall marathon programs start to enter their half-plus training distance, so training runs over 13.1 miles, I've read a few articles saying that the longest run should max out anywhere from 3 to 3.5 hours. Also know that 20 miles is a huge milestone in training, and how the Team Wilpers plans are written. If the 20-mile run is exceeding the 3-hour mark, should we consider cutting it off? So big question here being, should long runs exceed 3 to 3.5 hours? And there are definitely multiple schools of thought on this one. And to be quite honest, my opinion of it has changed a little bit over the years as well. And so we'll kind of first start and say some of the ideas and the reasons that people do suggest stopping it around 3 hours. And what it is you really always have to consider, both as me as a coach and the athlete, as what is the toll of this workout? Meaning, what is the recovery time like? How much is this taking out of the athlete? And if you have a workout that takes half a week to recover from, that was a bad workout in a training cycle, because we need you to be right back to training really within about 24 and definitely within 48 hours. So if a 20-mile run all of a sudden takes 4 hours and it takes half a week to recover from, it's a bad workout. Excuse me. On the flip side, if you do a 20-mile run, you're turning back around within 24 and 48 hours and ready to tackle another hard workout. A 20-miler might be very appropriate. Or then we put it back in time, that 3.5 hour, no problem. Certainly the ultra runners of the world are training up to 4 or 5 plus hours sometimes. You just have to manage the intensity that goes along with that. So speaking of the running world, sort of this ideology of stopping at 3 hours, even if that leaves the distance considerably short of the 26.2 of the marathon, kind of comes from the ultra running world. If you think about ultra runners who are trained to run 100 miles, they're not running a training run anywhere close to that distance. They might get up to 100K or around 60-ish some miles, leaving them still about 40 miles short of the finish line. So it didn't mean that was a bad training cycle. That was a great training cycle to get up that high and prep for that race. It's just kind of, they'll continue to run on race day until they reach the finish line. So the ideology can certainly be applied to the marathon as well. On the flip side, the marathon, very much like the 100-miler, although a little bit different, it's all relative, is a very long race. So running those 3.5 hour plus training runs not only prepares your body to handle all those footfalls, all that time continuing to exercise, but also really can train you mentally, because it's a daunting race. You got to remember, at mile 20, you still have quite a ways to go. That 6.25 tacked onto the end can really feel long, especially if you're looking at that being an hour, hour and a half plus. So there's certainly some mental benefit to kind of go in a little bit longer in the training cycle there. So ultimately, there's no right or wrong answer here. What I would suggest, however, is to use an extreme amount of caution when you're planning training runs that are going to be 3 or more hours. You need to really be able to evaluate what your body feels like, what the recovery time is like there. If you've been injury prone in the past, it's typically unwise to push yourself to that highest level. I would almost always take a slightly undertrained healthy athlete than a kind of fully trained up to the peak of what might take another person who's kind of coming in injured. So I want always healthy athletes on the starting line, even if it means pulling off the mileage, stopping that progression a little short to make sure we get them there healthy. On the flip side, if you're a person who's run many marathons and kind of struggle with that final third of the race, typically I've seen the solution to kind of getting over that hurdle is a little bit higher volume, both across the scope of the week, but also getting that long run progression up earlier in your training cycle, hitting a lot more of those long runs early and often so that your body is prepared to handle that extra distance. So our next question here was, other than training hills, are there any practical considerations for bridge running we should be working into training? I don't run over bridges that much, certainly nothing like the 5 in New York City. So outside of the hill repeats and workouts of similar nature, it's not particularly anything different for bridge running than hill running. You certainly want to make sure that, using New York City as an example, but races with big, long inclines, that you're including long, sustained inclines in your training. So using some of our marathon plans as an example, typically we do about quarter-mile repeats, but there are plenty of bridges in New York that are much more than quarter mile. So it makes a lot of sense to find some long, sustained hill repeats if possible. They're going to mimic the distance of those inclines on your race. I particularly like to include those in my long run. So they're not going to be super fast, super high intensity like hill repeats. They're going to be included in my long run. And for New York City in particular, only because I am a New York City resident and have been for a long time, run the New York City Marathon a lot, I would always want to finish on big hills because I know in the second half of the race in particular, there are a lot of hills. So you've got the Queensboro. That's certainly a bear around 16, 17, but Fifth Avenue around mile 23 is another 1 mile incline uphill at a very similar incline. And that's a toughie. So I would strongly suggest if you've got a lot of hills in your race, include them in your long runs. And if you have New York City coming up on your race roster, make sure you're finishing a lot of your long runs on long sustained hills because that is what you're going to be facing in the race course itself. One more thing with with bridges. Bridges are notorious for ruining GPS. So it's very important, I've talked about this with some of the tempo runs in the past, to be able to feel and find that pace because it's going to be very common when you're on the biggest bridges to lose that GPS signal or for it to start jumping all over the place. One more time for New York City in particular, half of the race starts on the lower level of the bridge, which means you're not getting any GPS signal until you reach Brooklyn around mile 2. So if you don't know how to find that pace and find it quickly at the beginning of the race, something absolutely to work on for your next 6-7 weeks leading into New York City. There's still time to get it down, but just know you're not going to have that GPS signal. It's certainly not going to be accurate without a amount of runners there for the first couple miles. So you got to be able to feel that pace. Our next question here was cadence related. Can we talk about cadence, please? Keep hearing that 180 plus is ideal. Mine is always around 165. Should I just accept that we're all different, or is this something I should work to improve on? And if so, how? So, great question. In most occasions, I don't worry too much about cadence, actually, unless it's probably below 160, and then things will change a little bit. However, there are instances in which I will, and tends to be if I have an athlete with especially repetitive lower body stress-related issues or stress-related issues in general. might be worth getting in. The reason that I don't get into cadence with all athletes is almost always when you get in, you start manipulating stride, you're going to lose short-term efficiency in order to make that adjustment. So most of the time I'm working with people that are in the middle of something, they're building towards something. If you have an A race on the horizon, this is absolutely not the time to get into that, maybe on the flip side of your A race. So I don't like taking healthy runners and messing too much with their form. Once again, the time that I would do it if I had a runner that was having repetitive stress issues, and then it might be worth taking that short-term setback in order to build a stronger running body and move it a little bit forward. So the ways that I would go about it if I were going to do it is to start incredibly slowly. So I wouldn't go from 165 to 180. I would try to move from 165 to 170 to 175, etc. And you might never ever make it to 180. 180 is pretty ambitious in terms of cadence there. But also work in very short sections. So wouldn't come into an easy run, let's say for an example, a 45-minute run, and say I need to maintain a new cadence of 170 across the whole scope of this run. I would use short 5-minute periods, so probably no more than 5-minute periods, in which I would be focused on trying to maintain that elevated cadence. If those start to feel comfortable, you can start to look at 10-minute intervals. If those start to feel comfortable, you can expand it, and hopefully at that point, it's actually developing as a new rhythm in your body. But if you try to go from 165 even to 170, but try to do the entire scope of the run, it's going to feel weird. You're definitely losing short-term efficiency. It's just a different gait, so be patient with it there. A couple ways to kind of nail that in. There are foot pods that can track it. A lot of watches track it now. You can use a metronome to make sure you're landing on it. And then finally, there are a lot of musical playlists that are designed, if you're musical, to exact BPM counts, so you can try to sync up your footfalls to those downbeats. Very important when it comes to cadence and working with cadence for runners is you have to be incredibly patient. This is going to be a multi-month process to make even the adjustment of the 5 steps per minute, much less a 10 or 15 steps per minute. So this is something you got to really think about over the scope of 3, 4, 5, 12 months of making an adjustment like that and just doing a little bit at a time. So just don't get discouraged with it. Like I said, stay patient. Not going to be a couple days, not going to be a couple weeks. It's going to be a multi-month, maybe even a couple year process. Our next question here was just wondering about heart rate on race day. I know that different races will have different answers, obviously, but realistically, to run my half at goal pace, I will likely be in zone 4 the entire time. So my answer to this question is an opinion, and it's my opinion, but plenty of other people might disagree, and neither of us would be right or wrong. So I don't like athletes looking at heart rate during races. I actually ask most of my runners to remove heart rate from their data screens because I don't want them focusing on it. And the reason, let me rephrase that a little bit. When I have athletes coming into races, what I really want them focusing on is effort level, is maintaining their breath. I want them doing positive visualizations. And what I don't want is them staring at a data screen, because that's not a lot of fun. And a couple of reasons that I really don't like athletes depending upon a heart rate, especially for their A races, is we'll start it with watch heart rate isn't very accurate. So unless you're really using a chest strap that you know is quite accurate, there's pretty good arm ones now, and you've really trained with it a lot. I certainly don't want people's 6 months of work coming down to the lowest piece of technology on their body, which is that wrist-based heart rate, just because it's simply not accurate. The other reason is heart rate is pretty darn fickle. So it is a good measurement of effort. However, it can be thrown off by caffeine intake, quality of sleep, just blood sugar levels as things go on. I'm sure people have heard about cardiac drift over the course of especially a half marathon or a marathon. And then the final thing that really can throw it off is stress. One of those stresses is looking at a heart rate screen on your watch that's not quite cooperating how you expected it to and starting to get worried or worked up about that. So It's a great metric. I always like to say I use heart rate as a comparable metric. I like to look at it after the fact to see if the workout is landing in the zones we want it to. But I've personally never liked using it during racing. So I would suggest to entirely eliminate it from your data screen to, as I mentioned before, really focus on your effort, your feel, and trying to match that to what you've done in training. That has been more successful for me. However, if you are a heart rate runner and you do have really high quality measurements and that is how you've designed your run and your race, for a half marathon, you will likely be at a very high zone 3, maybe a low zone 4. So the closer an athlete is to a 1 hour half marathon, which is literally like professional level, that's going to be a zone 4 race. Thinking always the reminder, threshold is how fast, how hard you can run for 1 hour. So 1 hour half marathon is exclusively a threshold, basically. The closer you are to maybe, let's say 2 hours, it's going to move a little bit away from zone 4, and it might be a little bit more like mid zone 3, potentially kind of heading up to the high end of zone 3. So if I were going to shoot like right in the middle for most runners, I'll kind of say half marathon pace is about 97% of threshold, probably more likely about like 94 to 97% of threshold for most people, which is going to be the top, kind of top 1/3 of your zone 3, if you will. But as I mentioned, I would strongly suggest, and I'd recommend for most runners, eliminate that heart rate, focus on feel, focus on having fun out there, focus on matching the effort level, and try to really enjoy your race day. Well, friends, that is all for now. So congrats in advance on an amazing job. Well done. Thanks so much for being part of the summer send-off, and we can't wait to see you back here in a couple weeks for the fall challenge. Have an amazing week 6.